The high school band room was never a quiet place, but today it felt different. It felt heavy. The air inside smelled of old wood, brass polish, and the kind of nervous sweat that only comes right before a big competition. 20 or 30 students sat in metal chairs, holding instruments that looked much more expensive than the clothes on their backs. They were the elite. The golden section, as the school called them. Most of them had been playing the piano or the violin since they were 5 years old. Their parents paid for private lessons on the weekends. They knew the difference between a Bach and a Beethoven just by looking at the sheet music. And then there was Leo. Leo sat in the back row, slightly off to the side. His chair was a standard school chair, scratched and faded, while the others had cushioned ones. He looked out of place and he knew it. He was wearing his white button-down shirt. It was a little too tight around the shoulders, and the sleeves didn't quite reach his wrists. His black dress shoes were dull, scuffed from walking to school every day. In his hands, he held a trumpet. It wasn't shiny and gold like the others. It was silver, or maybe it used to be, but now it had patches of brass showing through where the silver had worn away. It looked like it had survived a war. Leo hadn't grown up in a house with classical music playing in the background. He didn't have a piano in the living room. He had found this trumpet in a pawn shop 2 years ago, traded for an old bicycle he had fixed up. He taught himself to play by listening to old records on a cracked turntable his grandfather left behind. He played jazz, blues, and whatever catchy tune he heard on the radio. He played by ear, not by reading notes on a page. That was the problem, Mr. Thorne. The band director stood on the podium in the center of the room. He was a tall man with thinning gray hair and glasses that sat low on his nose. He was known for being strict. He didn't just want the music to be right. He wanted it to be perfect. He conducted with sharp, aggressive movements. If someone missed a note, his hand would stop in midair, and the silence that followed was terrifying. Stop. Stop, 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 Mr. Thorne shouted. He slashed his hand through the air. The music died instantly. The students lowered their instruments. A few of them turned their heads to look at the back row. Cellos, you are dragging. Trumpets, you are rushing. We sound like a broken clock, not an orchestra, Mr. Thorne barked. He looked down at his music stand, then adjusted his glasses. Let's take it from measure 32. And please, for the love of music, watch the dynamics. It is not all loud, he raised his baton. The room filled with sound again. It was a complex piece, a fast-paced classical number that required every student to be in perfect sync. For the first minute, it went well. But then, they reached a fast run of notes. Leo tried his best. His eyes were glued to the sheet music, but the notes looked like a swarm of black ants crawling over the paper. He could read music slowly, but when it moved this fast, he got lost. He panicked. He saw the other trumpet players lift their fingers to press the valves. So he did the same, hoping he was doing it right. He wasn't. A sharp, jagged sound cut through the harmony like a knife. It was a wrong note. A clam, as the musicians called it. And it was loud. Mr. Thorne's baton froze. The silence that followed was worse than the shouting. You could hear the air conditioning humming in the ceiling. You could hear someone shift their weight in their chair. Leo's face turned hot. He felt a bead of sweat roll down his temple. He lowered the trumpet, staring at the floor. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to be anywhere but in that room. Who was that? Mr. Thorne asked quietly. He didn't need to shout to be scary. Sir, that was the second trumpet part, said a student named Derek. Derek was the first chair trumpet player. He sat in the front row, his posture perfect, his uniform pristine. He turned his head slightly, looking over his shoulder with a smirk. It's the new guy, sir. Mr. Thorne walked down from the podium. His shoes clicked on the linoleum floor. He walked all the way to the back row and stood in front of Leo. Leo didn't look up. He could feel the teacher's shadow over him. Leo, Mr. Thorne said. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. We are 3 days away from the state showcase. This is not a rehearsal for a garage band. This is serious music. Everyone in this room has memorized their part. Why are you still struggling with measure 40? I'm sorry, sir, Leo mumbled. I'm trying. The rhythm changes fast. Trying isn't what we need. We need precision, Mr. Thorne said. He sighed a long, tired sigh that made Leo feel small. Look, I know you have talent. I've heard you play jazz in the cafeteria. But this is different. You can't just guess the notes. You have to know them. Mr. Thorne looked at the rest of the band. Take 5, he told them. Stretch your legs. Students stood up, talking and laughing. They formed little groups, ignoring Leo. Derek and his friends walked out into the hallway, probably to complain about the new kid ruining the piece. Leo sat alone in the back row. He took a cleaning cloth out of his case and began to wipe the valves of his trumpet, even though they didn't need cleaning. It was just something to do with his hands. He felt a presence near him. He looked up to see Mr. Thorne leaning against the wall, sipping from a thermos of coffee. He wasn't looking at Leo, just staring out into the room. Did you practice the scales I gave you? Mr. Thorne asked. Yes, sir, Leo lied. He hadn't. He had worked his shift at the grocery store every night this week. By the time he got home, he was too tired to play scales. Mr. Thorne took a sip of coffee. He didn't say anything for a while. You know, Derek has been playing since he was 4. His parents bought him that trumpet. It's a Stradivarius. Costs more than most cars. Leo looked at Derek's golden trumpet sitting on its stand in the front row. It looked like a piece of jewelry. I got mine for $50, Leo said quietly. Quality doesn't make the player, Mr. Thorne said. But discipline does. Right now, Leo, you are the weak link. If you miss that note on Saturday, the judges will deduct points from the whole band. It's not just about you. I know, Leo said. He felt a lump in his throat. I can do it. I just need to get it right. Hope so, Mr. Thorne said. He stood up straight and put the cap back on his thermos. Because if you can't, I might have to pull you from the lineup. We can't afford the risk. The words hit Leo hard. Pull you from the lineup. It meant he wouldn't play. He would just sit there, holding his instrument while everyone else performed. Or worse, he would be sent home entirely. Mr. Thorne walked back to the podium. All right, everyone. Back in your seats. Let's run the opening fanfare again. Places. The band members shuffled back to their chairs. The mood in the room shifted again. The fun break was over. It was back to business. They raised their instruments. Leo raised his battered trumpet. He looked at the music. The black ants were still there, mocking him. He thought about what Mr. Thorne said. Discipline. He didn't have the expensive lessons. He didn't have the perfect upbringing. But he had his hands, and he had his breath. He had been playing in the subway station for tips last summer, and nobody complained then. They stopped to listen. They threw money in his case. But this wasn't the subway. This was a stage with judges holding clipboards. Ready in 1, 2, 3, 4, Mr. Thorne counted off. The room exploded with sound. The opening fanfare was loud and proud. Leo focused. He counted the beats in his head. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. He watched Derek's fingers in the front row to make sure he was on the right timing. They made it through the first section. Then the second, Leo felt a tiny spark of hope. He was doing it. He was hitting the notes. He wasn't playing with as much feeling as he wanted. He was holding back, scared of making a mistake, but he was hitting the right pitches. They reached measure 40 again. The fast run. The place where he had messed up before. Leo's heart hammered against his ribs. He didn't look at the paper. He closed his eyes for a split second and trusted his muscle memory. He let his fingers fly over the valves. He didn't think about the notes. He thought about the sound. BAP-BAP-BAP-BAP-da. He nailed it. He opened his eyes. Mr. Thorne hadn't stopped the baton. The music kept going. They were playing. Leo felt a rush of adrenaline, like he had just jumped off a high dive. He was doing it. He was actually doing it. They finished the movement. Mr. Thorne lowered his baton. He looked around the room. He didn't say anything bad. It was acceptable, Mr. Thorne said, but it felt stiff. We have no soul. It sounds like robots. Let's take it from the beginning. Acceptable. It wasn't good, and it definitely wasn't great, but for Leo, it was a victory. He exhaled a long breath he didn't know he was holding. He looked at his trumpet. The silver plating was worn off on the valves where his fingers touched them every day. It showed the hard work. He looked up and saw Derek whispering to the girl next to him. They were both looking in his direction. Derek didn't look annoyed anymore. He looked thoughtful. Maybe he heard that Leo had actually played the run correctly. Or maybe he was just planning something else. Leo didn't trust him. The other students had their own world, a world of private lessons and music camps and money. Leo was an outsider looking in. He felt like a guest who had snuck into a party he wasn't invited to. The rehearsal continued for another hour. They played the same songs over and over. The walk home felt longer than usual. Leo's shoulder ached from the weight of the trumpet case, but he didn't switch it to the other side. He kept his head down, watching his worn-out sneakers scuff against the pavement. The neighborhood was getting loud. Evening was settling in, bringing with it the sounds of traffic. Dogs barking behind chain-link fences, and the distant thump of bass music from a passing car. He lived in a small apartment above a laundromat. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. When he unlocked the front door, the smell of fabric softener and detergent greeted him. It was a comforting smell, a smell that meant safety. He climbed the creaky wooden stairs, skipping the third step because it always squeaked loudly, and unlocked the apartment door. His mother was sitting at the small kitchen table, sorting through a pile of bills. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun. She was wearing her work uniform, a bright vest from the supermarket where she worked as a cashier. When she saw Leo, she tried to smile, but he could see the worry in her eyes. "Hey, honey!" "How was practice?" she asked, putting down a pen. "It was okay," Leo said. He didn't want to worry her. He didn't tell her about the teacher wanting to kick him out or the wrong notes he played. "Mr. Thorne is really pushing us for the showcase on Saturday." "You're going to be great," she said, her voice full of fierce belief. "I've heard you play. You have a gift." Leo smiled a little, putting his case down gently on the linoleum floor. "Thanks, Mom.
Oh.
There's some leftovers in the fridge." "Spaghetti," she said, turning back to the bills. "I'm going to pick up an extra shift tomorrow night, so I might be late when you get back from school." Leo nodded. That was normal. They worked hard to keep things going. He heated up the spaghetti and ate it quickly, standing at the counter. He wasn't really hungry, but he knew he needed the energy. His mind was already racing, thinking about the music. After he rinsed his plate, he went to his room. It was small, just big enough for a bed, a dresser, and a small desk cluttered with school books. But in the corner, there was an old stereo system he had fixed up last year. He sat on his bed and pulled the USB drive out of his pocket. Mr. Thorne's words echoed in his head. "You need to feel the music, not just read it." He plugged the drive into the stereo. He took a deep breath and pressed play. At first, it just sounded like noise. There were so many instruments. He could hear the violins squeaking, the drums booming, the cellos humming. It was overwhelming. He closed his eyes and tried to pick out the trumpet part. It was there, weaving in and out, sometimes loud, sometimes soft. It wasn't just playing notes. It was having a conversation with the other instruments. Leo listened to the track 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. He lay back on his pillow, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. He started to hear things he hadn't noticed before. He heard how the trumpet would echo the melody the violins played just a second earlier. He heard how the music would get quiet, like a whisper, right before a big explosion of sound. Mr. Thorne was right. Leo had been treating the music like a math problem. If he pressed the right valves at the right time, he would get the answer. But this wasn't math. It was a story. It was about people, or maybe just one person, fighting through something hard and coming out the other side. Around midnight, the music stopped. The house was quiet. His mother had gone to bed hours ago. Leo felt a sudden urge to play. He didn't want to wake his mom, so he packed up his trumpet and slipped out the back door. There was a small park behind the apartment building. It had a rusted swing set and a broken bench. It was dark, lit only by a flickering orange street lamp. But it was private. Leo walked to the far end of the park near the old oak tree. He put his case down, took out his trumpet, and stood under the light. It was chilly. The air nipped at his ears. He put the trumpet to his lips. He didn't try to play the hard classical piece right away. He started with something slow, something he knew. A blues song he had heard 1,000,000 times. His notes floated through the night air. They were soulful and rough, full of the crackle and pop that comes from a cheap instrument. But the feeling was real. He closed his eyes and let his fingers move. He wasn't thinking about the sheet music. He was thinking about his day, about Mr. Thorne's doubt, about Derek's smirk, about the pile of bills on his mother's table. He poured all that frustration into the horn. He played for an hour. His lips started to get numb again, but he didn't stop. He felt like he was scratching an itch he couldn't reach. It felt good. Then he decided to try the showcase piece. He played the opening notes. They were okay. He played the fast run. He missed a few notes, but the rhythm was better. He played until the end of the song. When he finished, he stood there, breathing hard. It wasn't perfect. Not like the recording. But it felt different. It felt alive. The next day at school, the atmosphere was tense. It was Friday. The day before the big competition. Everyone in the band seemed to be walking on eggshells. The hallway chatter was louder, but in the band room it was silent. When Leo walked in, carrying his case, a few heads turned. Derek was in the front row, polishing his golden trumpet with a soft yellow cloth. He didn't look up, but his two friends did. They whispered something and laughed. Leo ignored them. He took his seat in the back. He put his trumpet together carefully. He screwed the mouthpiece in tight. He was ready. Mr. Thorne walked in. He looked serious. He didn't say hello. He just walked to the podium, tapped his baton on the stand, and pointed to the music. From the beginning, no warm-ups. "We don't have time," he commanded. They played. It was rough. The brass section was too loud, and the woodwinds were dragging. Mr. Thorne stopped them immediately. "No, you are playing like you are asleep. Wake up," he shouted. "This is the state showcase. Do you want to go home with a participation trophy, or do you want to win?" He glared at the cello section. "And you are dragging your feet. Pick it up." He spent the next 20 minutes drilling them. He made them play the same 4 measures over and over again. Play stop, critique, play again. It was exhausting. Leo's fingers were cramping up, but he kept going. He listened to the recording in his head, matching the timing of the professional players Mr. Thorne had given him. Around noon, they took a break. The students rushed out to the vending machines or the cafeteria. Leo stayed behind, drinking from the water fountain. He was tired, but his focus was sharp. He was about to sit down when he saw Mr. Thorne step out of his office. The teacher was on his cell phone, looking upset. He walked out into the hallway, leaving the door to his office slightly open. Leo didn't mean to snoop. He was just walking past the door to put his water bottle in his bag, but he heard his name. "I know, sir." Mr. Thorne's voice came from the hallway. "I'm trying. But the section is weak this year." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. "Yes, I know. He's a liability. I told you, he's not ready for this level of performance. His intonation is all over the place." Leo froze. His hand hovered over his bag. A liability. That was the word the teacher had used. Not student, not musician. A liability. "I don't want to pull him now," Mr. Thorne continued. "It would crush his spirit. He has raw talent, but yes, I know. If he messes up tomorrow, the whole ensemble looks bad. I understand." Mr. Thorne's voice got lower as he walked further away down the hall. Leo couldn't hear the rest. Leo sat back down in his chair. The air in the room suddenly felt very thick. He felt cold, even though it was warm in the room. So it was true. Mr. Thorne didn't believe in him. The teacher was just keeping him around because he felt sorry for him, or maybe because he was desperate for trumpet players. But in his heart, Mr. Thorne expected Leo to fail. Leo looked at the sheet music on his stand. The notes blurred. Why was he trying so hard? He was just a kid from the apartments above the laundromat. These other kids, like Derek, They were born for this. They had the best instruments, the best lessons, the support. Leo was just pretending. The doubt crept in like a thief. It stole his energy. He thought about walking out. He could just grab his case and leave. Go home. Tell his mom he quit. It would be easier. It wouldn't hurt so much as failing in front of everyone. The students started coming back in from lunch break. Derek walked by Leo's chair. He stopped for a second. You coming back for the afternoon run-through? Derek asked. There was a hint of sarcasm in his voice. We need all the help we can get, right? Leo looked up. He looked at Derek's smug face. He saw the doubt in his eyes. He heard Mr. Thorne's voice in his head again. He's not ready for this. Something inside Leo shifted. It was a small spark at first, but it grew hot. He was tired of being underestimated. He was tired of people thinking he didn't belong just because he didn't have the fancy clothes or the expensive trumpet. I'm coming back, Leo said. His voice was steady. And I won't mess it up. Derek raised an eyebrow, surprised by the confidence in Leo's voice. We'll see, Derek said, walking away. Leo put the trumpet to his lips. He didn't play. He just took a deep breath, filling his lungs with air. He closed his eyes and imagined the story of the music again. It wasn't about Mr. Thorne. It wasn't about Derek. It wasn't about the judges. It was about him. It was about his struggle, his mom's struggle, the fight to be seen and heard. The bus ride to the city felt longer than the 2 hours it actually took. The scenery changed from the quiet, tree-lined streets of their town to the busy highways and tall concrete buildings of the downtown area. The bus was noisy at first, filled with students laughing, listening to music on headphones, and eating snacks. But as they got closer to the competition center, the bus got quieter. Leo sat by the window, watching the world go by. His trumpet case was on his lap, and he kept his hands resting on the hard black plastic. Outside, the sky was gray and cloudy, matching the nervous feeling in his stomach. He felt a little isolated. The other kids sat in clusters, friends, talking about what they were going to eat for lunch, or how scared they were of the judges from the state university. No one sat next to Leo. He was the outsider. The wild card they weren't sure about. When the bus finally pulled into the parking lot of the massive Performing Arts Center, the silence broke. Everyone started talking at once, grabbing their bags and instruments. The building was huge. It had glass walls that reflected the sky and giant stone pillars at the entrance. It looked like a place where important things happened, not a place for a kid with a battered trumpet from a pawn shop. Mr. Thorne stood up at the front of the bus. He didn't shout, but his voice cut through the noise. Listen to me. When we get off this bus, we are representatives of our school. Stay together. Carry your instruments properly. Do not run. And please, for the love of music, do not embarrass yourselves. Everyone shuffled off the bus. The air outside was cool and crisp. Leo followed the crowd, clutching his case. He felt very small standing next to the building. They walked inside, and the first thing that hit Leo was the sound. It was a chaotic mix of instruments from 100 different schools. Flutes trilling, drums banging, low brass rumbling like thunder. The lobby was packed with students in uniforms of all colors, red jackets, blue dresses, white vests. It was overwhelming, Mr. Thorne herded them like a sheepdog toward a practice room they had rented for an hour to warm up. Keep your eyes forward. Don't let the other schools distract you, he said. The practice room was in the basement. It smelled of damp concrete and old carpet. It wasn't glamorous, but it was private. Everyone set up their music stands. The tension in the room was high. You could feel it buzzing in the air. Right, warm up. Long tones. Softly, Mr. Thorne commanded. The room filled with a low hum as the students played long. Steady notes to get their lips ready. Leo put his trumpet together. His hands were shaking a little bit, so he took a deep breath to steady them. He played a low C. It felt steady. He played a high G. It cracked slightly. He winced and tried again. This time it was clear. Derek, the first chair trumpet, was standing nearby. He played a series of notes that were incredibly fast and high. He made it look effortless, his fingers flying over the valves. He looked at Leo out of the corner of his eye, almost showing off. Leo ignored him. He played his own warm-up, focusing on the sound, trying to make it as warm and rich as the recording Mr. Thorne had given him. After 20 minutes, Mr. Thorne clapped his hands. "All right, that's enough. Let's run the tricky part one last time. Measures 30 to 50. They played it. It was good, but it wasn't great. They were tired from the bus ride, and the echo in the basement room made everything sound muddy. Mr. Thorne stopped them. "You're rushing," he said, looking specifically at the percussion section. "Listen to the basses. Feel the pulse. If you rush, you fall apart." They tried again. "Better." "Okay," Mr. Thorne said, checking his watch. 5 minutes until we go to the holding area. Put your instruments away. Do not play again until you are on stage. We need to save your chops." Save your chops meant saving the strength in their lips. Playing too much right before a performance could make a player's lips tired and swollen. They packed up and walked back upstairs to the main hall. This was the holding area, a large room with chairs where dozens of bands were waiting. There was a screen on the wall showing a live feed of the stage. They watched another band performing. They looked professional. Their uniforms were sharp, and their sound was polished. Leo sat on his case against a wall. He watched the screen. He saw the judges sitting in the dark hall, clipboards in hand. They looked serious. One judge was even frowning. Leo's heart beat faster. He felt like he might throw up. He took a sip of water from the fountain in the corner, trying to cool down. Time seemed to drag on. Minutes felt like hours. Leo watched the other bands go. Some were good, some were okay. Every time a band finished, the students in the holding area would clap politely. But everyone was really just thinking about their own performance. Finally, the announcer's voice came over the loudspeaker. "Up next, Central High School. Please proceed to the tuning room. Stand up." "Line up," Mr. Thorne said. "Instrument cases in the pile here. Do not bring them backstage. Grab your music and your horn." The chaos of movement broke out. Leo grabbed his trumpet and left his case in the pile with the others. He felt a moment of panic. What if someone stole it? But he pushed the thought away. He had to focus. They marched in a single file line toward the tuning room. This was a small, soundproofed room right next to the stage. A man with a headset was waiting there with a tuning note, a note played on a piano. "Oboe, give me an A," the man said. The oboe player played the note. "Then each section tuned to that note," trumpets the man said. Derek played his note first. It was perfect. The man nodded. Then the rest of the trumpets played. Leo played last. He took a deep breath, focused his air, and played the note. It rang out clear and true. The man gave a small thumbs up. "Good luck," the man said. "You're on." The heavy soundproof door opened, and the bright lights of the stage spilled in. The contrast was blinding. Leo blinked, trying to adjust his eyes. He could see the rows of velvet seats in the audience, though most of them were empty, since it was a competition and not a public concert yet. But in the back, he saw a blur of people. He squinted as he walked to his chair in the back row. He scanned the back of the hall. There, in the far right corner, he saw her, his mother. She was wearing a bright red coat so he could see her. She was waving frantically. She looked so proud. Leo smiled. The knot in his stomach loosened just a little bit. She was there. That was all that mattered. He sat down, arranged his music on the stand, and put his trumpet to his lips. The stage lights were hot, beaming down on his face. He could feel beads of sweat forming on his forehead. The room was huge, much bigger than the band room at school. The acoustics were different. Everything sounded crisp and immediate. Mr. Thorne walked to the center of the stage. He looked out at the audience, then turned to face the band. He looked calm, but Leo could see a small tick in his jaw, a sign that he was nervous too. Mr. Thorne raised his baton. The entire band leaned forward, waiting for the signal. The silence in the hall was heavy. It felt like the air was holding its breath. Down went the baton. The music exploded. The opening fanfare was loud and powerful. It filled the entire hall. Leo played with all his might, but he was careful to keep his sound in tune with the others. He watched Derek like a hawk, matching his timing. For the first minute, it went perfectly. They were a machine. They moved into the slower second movement. This was where they had to be expressive. Mr. Thorne made flowing motions with his hands. Leo tried to pour his emotion into the notes. He thought about the park at night, the cool air, the feeling of freedom. He played softly, letting the sound float up to the ceiling. But then, things started to go wrong. It wasn't a big mistake at first. It was the timpani drums. Usually, the drummer was perfect. But maybe the lights were in his eyes, or maybe he was just nervous. On a crucial beat, he hit the drum a split second too early. Thump. It was a small sound. But to the musicians on stage, it was like a gunshot. The timing was thrown off. The cellos, who were counting on that beat to come in, hesitated for a fraction of a second. The violins rushed to catch up. The music wobbled. It was like a car hitting a patch of ice. The whole band swerved. Panic started to set in. Leo could feel it in the air. The students were looking at each other, their eyes wide. They were losing the groove. The beautiful, cohesive sound was turning into a mess of noise. Mr. Thorne's face turned red. He tried to correct the beat with his baton, waving it frantically, but the panic had already set in. The band was rushing now, everyone trying to play faster to fix the mistake, which only made it worse. They were falling apart. The song was speeding up like a train going down a hill with no brakes. Leo saw the look on Mr. Thorne's face. It was a look of defeat. He knew they were done. The judges would deduct points for the timing error, and the flow of the music was ruined. They were about to crash and burn, and then time seemed to slow down for Leo. He looked at the sheet music. The notes were jumping around, but he didn't see them as notes anymore. He saw the story he had listened to on the recording. He remembered what he had played in the park in the piece of music. There was a bridge's small section. The trumpet had a solo line that connected the crashing drums back to the main melody. It was coming up in 2 measures. The adrenaline from the performance stayed with Leo, but as the band walked out of the grand hall and back into the busy lobby, the noise of reality started to creep back in. The air smelled of floor wax and cheap coffee. Other schools were gathering in clusters, some celebrating, some crying. It was a roller coaster of emotions, but Leo felt strangely detached. He was floating in that bubble that exists right after you do something scary and survive. His mother was still beaming, holding onto his arm like he might float away if she let go. "I'm so proud of you," she said again, for the 10th time. "You sounded like a professional," Leo managed a weak smile. "Thanks, Mom. I think it went okay." "Okay." It was wonderful. She insisted. Just then, the heavy double doors to the auditorium opened, and Mr. Thorne stepped out. He looked tired. His tie was loosened, and he carried a clipboard under his arm. The band members who were standing nearby went quiet, looking at him for a sign. The judging results wouldn't be posted for another hour. But the students were desperate for their teacher's approval. Mr. Thorne looked at the group of students milling around. He cleared his throat. "All right, everyone. Good effort. The mistake in the percussion section was unfortunate, but we recovered. Most of you—" His eyes flickered toward the back of the group where Leo was standing. He didn't say anything more, but a few students turned to look at Leo. Derek was among them. He gave Leo a subtle thumbs up. "Load up the bus," Mr. Thorne commanded. "We have a long wait for the awards ceremony. Don't go wandering off." The bus ride back to the school was the complete opposite of the ride there. On the way to the city, everyone was nervous and quiet. Now the tension was gone, replaced by a chaotic energy. Students were singing, gossiping, and eating the rest of their snacks. Leo sat by the window again, but this time, he wasn't alone. "Is this seat taken?" Leo looked up. It was Derek. He was holding his expensive golden trumpet case, looking a bit awkward. "No," Leo said, moving his bag off the seat. Derek sat down with a sigh. He adjusted his jacket. "Man, my hands are still shaking," he said. "I thought we were dead meat when the drums rushed," Leo said. "It got pretty scary." Derek turned to look at him, his expression serious. "What you did back there? I've never seen anything like that in a competition." You're not supposed to improvise in a classical piece. You know that, right? Leo looked down at his hands. I know Mr. Thorne is going to kill me. Derek let out a short laugh. Are you kidding? Thorne might act like a robot, but he loves music more than he loves rules. I saw his face when you finished that run. He wasn't mad, Leo. He was impressed. You think so? Leo asked. I know so, Derek said. I've been playing with him for 3 years. I know that look. Usually, when we mess up, he looks like he wants to quit his job. Today, he looked surprised, in a good way. They sat in silence for a minute, watching the trees go by. It felt strange to be sitting next to Derek, the guy who had ignored him all week. You're really good, by the way, Derek said quietly. I mean, your tone is rough because of that old horn, but your sense of rhythm, it's natural. I have to practice 4 hours a day to keep up. You just feel it, thanks, Leo said. He felt a warm feeling in his chest. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about being accepted. When they arrived back at the school, the sun was starting to set. The plan was to go back into the band room, drop off their instruments, change out of their uniforms, and then get back on the bus to go to the awards ceremony at the city university. The mood in the band room was relaxed. Students were joking, unbuttoning their stiff jackets and hanging them up. Leo put his trumpet back in its corner spot. He felt a sense of peace. He had done his job. No matter what happened at the awards, he knew he had played his heart out. He was about to leave when he heard his name, Leo. A word. He froze. Mr. Thorne was standing by his office door. He wasn't holding his clipboard anymore. He was holding a bottle of water. Leo walked over to the office. He felt the eyes of the other students on him again. He stepped inside the small office. It was cluttered with piles of sheet music, trophies collecting dust on shelves, and photos of old bands. Mr. Thorne closed the door. The noise from the band room became a dull hum. Leo took a deep breath. Here it was. The lecture. He was going to get yelled at for standing up, for improvising, for breaking the rules of the competition. I'm sorry about the solo, sir, Leo started to say. I know I wasn't supposed to change the music. Mr. Thorne held up a hand to stop him. He took a sip of water and leaned back against his desk. He looked at Leo for a long moment. The teacher's face was hard to read. Do you know why I stopped you yesterday, Leo? Mr. Thorne asked. Leo shook his head. Because I was playing wrong? Partially, Mr. Thorne said. I stopped you because you were hiding. You have a voice, a unique voice, but you were trying to bury it under what you thought classical music should sound like. You were trying to be a robot. Mr. Thorne stood up and walked to a shelf where a small radio sat. In classical music, we obsess over precision. We want every note to be in the right place, at the right volume, with the right tone. It is beautiful, but sometimes it becomes sterile. It becomes lifeless. He turned to look at Leo. Today, when the band fell apart, the other students panicked. They looked at me for help. They looked at their sheet music. But you didn't. I just wanted to fix the tempo, Leo said. You did more than that, Mr. Thorne said. You took control. You injected life into a dying performance. Was it in the score? No. Was it risky? Absolutely. If it had failed, we would have been embarrassed. Leo looked down at his shoes. But it didn't fail, Mr. Thorne continued, his voice softening. It was the most honest musical moment I have heard from a student in 10 years. Leo looked up, surprised. Really? Really, Mr. Thorne said. I told the judges in the hallway that it was a planned artistic interpretation. I don't know if they bought it, but they didn't deduct points for it, that's for sure. Mr. Thorne sighed and crossed his arms. I was hard on you this week, Leo. I didn't think you were ready. I thought your lack of formal training would be a liability. I owe you an apology. I was wrong. Leo didn't know what to say. He had never heard a teacher apologize before. It's okay, sir. I was scared too. That's good, Mr. Thorne said. Fear is normal, but you didn't let the fear stop you. You used it. That is what separates a student from a musician. He clapped a hand on Leo's shoulder. It was heavy and warm. Go change. Put on something comfortable. We are going to the awards ceremony. And Leo? Yes, sir. Next year, Mr. Thorne said, looking him in the eye. I want you as first chair. Leo's jaw dropped. But Derek has been first chair for 2 years. Derek is excellent. He is a technician. He plays what is written perfectly, Mr. Thorne said. But a leader needs more than technique. A leader needs soul. You proved today that you can lead the section when it matters. Mr. Thorne opened the office door. Go on. Get out of here. Leo walked out of the office in a daze. He walked to his locker, his hands trembling slightly. He took off his stiff uniform jacket and hung it up. He put on his t-shirt and jeans. He felt lighter, like a heavy weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He met his mother outside the band room. She was waiting on a bench, reading a book. She looked up and smiled. All good? She asked. Yeah, Leo said, smiling back. Really good. They walked out to the bus. This time, when Leo got on, Derek waved him over to the back seat again. Leo sat down. We heard Derek said, Thorne is making you first chair next year. The news had traveled fast. Leo blushed. Yeah, he told me just now. Deserved, Derek said simply. Honestly, man, I'm tired of the pressure. First chair has to play every solo perfectly. I'd rather just blend in. You can have the spotlight. Thanks, Derek, Leo said. Don't mention it, Derek said, pulling out his phone. Hey, do you play any video games? Not really, Leo admitted. I'll teach you, Derek said. We have a long wait at the ceremony. For the rest of the bus ride, they talked about video games, school, and movies. They didn't talk about music. It was normal. It was human. Leo wasn't just the new kid or the poor kid anymore. He was just one of the guys. The bus parked at the university auditorium where the awards ceremony was being held. It was a massive building. Hundreds of students from all over the state were flooding into the main hall. There was a buzz of excitement in the air. They found their section in the seating area. The band sat together in their block. Mr. Thorne stood at the end of the row, counting heads. He looked at Leo and gave a small, approving nod. The ceremony was long. Very long. First, they gave out awards for individual solos. Then they gave out awards for specific sections, like Best Woodwinds or Best Percussion. Their school didn't win any of those. Leo could feel the group's energy dipping. They were tired. They had been up since 6 a.m. Finally, it was time for the big awards. The categories were based on school size. Their school was in the large school category, which meant the competition was fierce. The announcer, a man with a very loud voice, walked up to the microphone. And now the announcer boomed. The award for the best brass section. The nominees are... He listed 5 schools. Their school was the third one announced. The band members sat up straighter, holding hands or bouncing their knees nervously.